Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Prince and the King of Wakanda, okay, T'Challa, whatever his name is, Black Panther. Now, the Black Panther was awesome in Civil War. He got an appropriate uniform given the look from the movie, but otherwise in Future Fight he's been about as effective as a wet towel is in a beauty salon. He fucking sucks, just as much as that joke sucks. And so much has been said about the character, and so many times the community has rallied behind, make Black Panther better. Black Panther lives matter, Black lives matter, fucking comic book lives matter, because he's just horrible. He's like Elektra level tier 2 status. At least Elektra has the excuse of not having a 6-star skill, of not having a tier 2, but this is potentially as good as it gets for the Wakandan king. And that's really depressing, not only because the character is awesome and has a rich history, but also because that now the character is getting a lot of traction in movies, first with the Civil War movie, but there will be more coming in the pipeline later on, and yet this is the best that we've got. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about Black Panther today, just because I brought this up a little bit in the live stream a few days ago, and it got me thinking about the character in a little bit more depth, and I wanted to kind of give him his own video just to talk about my thoughts on the character and where they can go from here. And this is also partially inspired by the new tier 2 advancement for Black Bolt. Black Bolt is kind of a similar character to Black Panther. They both only have one level to farm for, so they're both pretty difficult characters to find and to build up, but they're still technically farmable. They're not only available through bio selectors or bio subscriptions, and they're both kings. Black Bolt is the king of the Inhumans, the silent stoic king, and thank you for the Dimension Rift, Pedro. Vote for Pedro, guys. And as you guys know, Black Panther is the king of Wakanda, or the Prince of Wakanda, depending on what time. Anyways, he's the king of Wakanda. So they're both kings. They're both pretty unfarmable, except one is pretty good now with his tier 2, and the other one is the one you're watching right now, who may or may not make it to the end of chapter 10-8, which is pretty fucking sad. I'm not actually playing. This is fully on auto, guys. So, but the reason why I've been a little bit inspired by Black Bolt's new tier 2 is because Black Bolt's new tier 2 makes the character way more viable, and unfortunately, Black Panther already has a tier 2, so it would need to be reworked. But if they were willing to give someone like Black Bolt a good tier 2, even though he's technically a farmable character, there is still a sliver of hope for someone like Black Panther. Wow, I'm happily surprised that he cleared, because I didn't want to have to switch to Black Bolt. But so given the sliver of hope, and given the direction that we've seen Netmarble take Black Bolt in, I guess there's some small expectation, or there's some reasonable idea that Black Panther could get a similar treatment at some point down the line. Now, the character is not totally horrendous, horrible, garbage tier. He's pretty close to being garbage tier, but he's helped out a lot by his uniform and not much else. His uniform increases his bleed damage, and it adds an iframe to one of his skills. His tier 2 is just absolutely garbage. But that's actually not what I'm trying to focus on, or what I want to focus on in the video today. What I want to focus on the video today is the bleed mechanic. And it's something that's pretty central to the character. I mean, it's built into his uniform, it's built into most of his skills, and I feel like it's kind of the centerpiece of this character more so than other characters, because there are other characters that do bleed damage. I'd say the most notable one is probably, for damage purposes, Black Dwarf, and then for sarcasm and joke purposes, Elektra, because she does do an iota of bleed damage in addition to the iota of regular damage that she does. But Black Panther is the prime candidate for the bleed tag and for associated bleed skills. Now, I'm not saying that he should be on the power level of Black Dwarf, but it's interesting how both Black Panther and Black Dwarf have bleed damage. Guys, I smell a conspiracy. But anyways, it would be really cool if they reworked the bleed mechanic, at least for Black Panther. And so the reason why I'm saying it this way is because they don't actually have to rework the whole bleed mechanic for all characters. They can have differing levels of bleed based on the character. I mean, there's nothing that is stopping them from doing that. They've already built into the game both a invulnerability mechanic and an invincibility mechanic, which would seem like the same thing, you know, immunity and invincibility, but are clearly not at all the same thing. So I can actually redo this level. It takes a long time, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, what I think would be, or this is basically my suggestion for the best way to improve Black Panther. Because, yeah, you could make his 6-star skill invulnerable or whatever, immune while he's doing it. You could give him kind of the Black Bolt tier 2 treatment, but that's kind of boring, and that's been done a lot. You know, Carnage got it, Elsa got it, Black Bolt got it. It's not really all that interesting to make one skill basically the priority over all others. We've seen enough characters that have that. Even Sister Grimm has the massive heal and the damage boost on her 6-star skill now with her tier 2. So my recommendation or my suggestion is to improve Black Panther's bleed damage. And there's a couple of ways that Netmarble can do this, and I think whichever way they go with it, if they decide to increase his bleed damage, that it would be a really interesting mechanic, and it would make the mechanic a lot more fun to play with and to play against. And I think if you have both of those things in a redesign for a character, that's going to bring a lot of positivity and a lot of, you know, good karma and good vibes from the community. So what are the suggestions that I'm here to make? Well, you know, instead of just giving the bleed damage like a flat buff, there are a couple of different things they can do with it. Now, I will say that I think that this bleed buff should in some way be connected to or be applied to world bosses. I know world bosses are not very difficult to beat anymore. They used to be a lot harder to beat, and that's when a lot more criticism was levied against or leveled against Black Panther. But it would still be cool if he could have some smaller scale effect of his bleed damage on the world bosses, and I think that would go a long way to making the character more interesting, even for new players to pick up as their top hero. And my suggestion is basically like this: instead of having the bleed damage just be a flat number, like whatever, 800 damage per second for 3 seconds, or every, you know, third of a second for 4 seconds, or whatever, you could have bleed stacks. Now, this is not a new concept, guys. You can find this in a lot of different video games. Some video games have like a counter. Some video games have a meter that fills up with bleed damage, and then once that meter gets all the way, then something happens. But all of the, thank you for the Dimension Rift, Bonal 420. But all of the different ideas kind of revolve around the same concept. The bleed damage or the bleed effect will build up either over time or over a certain number of hits, and then when it reaches a certain limited time, or once it like reaches the time limit, or once it reaches the stack limit, then damage will be dealt on a more massive scale. So it's really interesting to me because it prioritizes this kind of cautious or kind of calculated offense where you know that you have to build up bleed stacks to do more damage, but you can't just go crazy and start mashing all of your attack buttons, because you're gonna get hit by attacks. They're not all iframes that you're doing, and you're gonna get punished and you're gonna die. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it, and it doesn't need to be something that's overpowered, but it could be something as simple as, like, you know, when you apply the bleed, when you apply one bleed stack, you'll see a little icon above the enemy's head. So you guys can see there above Hellstrom's health bar, there's a little thing there. It's actually not from Black Panther, it's from Clea. But we have little icons already for buffs and debuffs, and we have an icon for bleed damage. So we could have that icon, and it could have a little number next to it, a 1. And then the next time you hit the character with a bleed applicable attack, that stack goes to 2. And let's say when that stack goes to 10, then all of the stacks will be removed or refreshed back to 0, and the enemy will take, like, whatever, 5% of their HP as damage, 10% of their HP as damage. Maybe they'll have, like, they'll lose a little bit of health, but they'll have like a massive attack speed and movement speed debuff for like 30 seconds, you know, like 50% move speed, attack speed down. So the character essentially becomes crippled, because that's another mechanic that a lot of bleed games, or games that have bleed mechanics, work into the bleed effect, which is where the character kind of becomes debilitated in some way, or kind of crippled, and then they can't move properly, or they can't, you know, attack properly or aim properly. So there's a lot of things that they could do with it, and I think that revisiting the bleed mechanics and reworking them, while it is complicated and it would be like a bit of a learning curve for the community, I think it would yield a lot more, not only a lot more creativity from characters and from players who are using those characters, but it would also make Black Panther kind of the poster child and the king, so to speak, for this new reworked bleed mechanic, and it would make the character, even if he's not that much more powerful, it would make him so much more interesting because he's kind of the guinea pig. He's the first one to debut this new mechanic, and people would get to, everyone I would imagine would at least spend a little bit of time. There's the bleed right up there. Everyone would spend a little bit of time testing him out, and that's really cool, and that would bring a lot of attention to the character, and he might actually die here. Yeah, he's gonna die. That's fine, but it would bring a lot of attention to the character. People would play him at least for a little bit of time, and then if it caught on and it was actually a pretty powerful mechanic, people could use him. Now, the reason why I suggest that it should apply to world bosses is only basically for new players, because new players are still struggling to beat world bosses, and a lot of people end up picking their favorite character versus the most effective or most strong character, and then they feel bad when they can't beat world bosses even though they've got multiple 6-star characters. So I think that's probably a good barometer for Netmarble to be reworking their tier 2 characters, because prior to his tier 2, Black Bolt probably couldn't kill any world bosses without a lot of help, a lot of strong strikers. Thank you for the Dimension Rift, Dan Astor. But after his tier 2 rework, or after his tier 2 passive was revealed, Black Bolt, and also as well for someone like Elsa, for someone like Ant-Man even, they become a lot more world boss viable, and I think that's a pretty good barometer for the character. Now, I know some people will say in the comments Black Panther can already kill world bosses. Yeah, but it's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult, and it's not fun at all, and you basically just have to abuse other mechanics in the game, like really good obelisks, really good ISO sets, really good strikers, lots of switching, a lot of support characters like Werewolf's buff or Groot's heal, or you know, something like that. So it's really not just the character that's getting it done top to bottom, and also his biggest strength, his bleed, is not being applied. It doesn't even work against world bosses, which is so lame. So that's why I thought, and I still think that the bleed effect should apply. And so if you take my previous example about bleed stacks, instead of it being 10 bleed stacks before the effect happens, it could be like 20 for the world boss, or even 30. It could be, you know, half of the effectiveness or a third of the effectiveness, but even if it just still applied, that would be a really positive step and a really strong upgrade for the character. And I think I would like that personally, and I think that a lot of the community would really appreciate that over just simply buffing the character's damage, you know, giving him immunity on one of his skills. That's kind of the quick fix or the cheap fix, but I don't think it's really going to accurately reflect the character's skill and prowess and strength, and it's also going to continue to underuse and improperly use the bleed mechanic. And I think the bleed mechanic is a very strong mechanic, especially in these ARPG type games. It's usually, I mean, not in every game, but in some games the bleed mechanic is a very feared mechanic, because if you don't keep track of it, if you don't monitor the bleed stacks, you can be like punished very quickly for it, and you're usually punished very heavily. So something along the lines of like the way Dark Souls does bleed damage, where it builds up and then you suddenly lose a chunk of your health. That's probably the most extreme example of bleed damage in a similar type of game. I know the way that you play Dark Souls is nowhere near the way you play Future Fight, but they're still both kind of ARPG type games. And if you play as Black Panther in every game mode, then it is definitely as hardcore as Dark Souls. So those are my thoughts on Black Panther. I really want the character to be better, especially in light of the recent changes to Black Bolt. They're kind of like brothers from another mother. You know, they're both in the Illuminati. They both have black in their name. They're both kings. And so I just really want the Wakandan king to have the same strength and the same power that his counterpart has. And I know there are other characters that deserve this treatment as well, Hulk being one of them, and I will get to them in due time. But the Black Panther one really got me thinking, and I really think that the bleed mechanic is the best way to go about changing the character for the better. And it would not only bring the character to a new level, which is good for the game, but it would bring the game to a new level by introducing these new mechanics, or a reworked mechanic that's more powerful and more deadly, and that actually deserves some respect. You know, I mean, the time freeze mechanic, you basically have to build teams around this mechanic to try and beat it. It's that strong. And we've seen that in Shadowlands, characters bleed for thousands of damage. You see Hawkeye doing it, you see Malekith doing it. Fuck you guys for commenting on the way I pronounce that name. Malekith. Anyways, Malekith my ass, because I want Black Panther to be good, guys. Let me know what your comments are on Black Panther. Let me know how you feel about the character. I want to hear your suggestions if you've got something better, or if you've got an even better, more refined version of what I'm discussing or what I'm suggesting, guys. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.